Hi, everybody. Welcome back to EDU Me, the podcast that focuses on bridging the gap to foster stronger relationships between parents and schools by empowering parents with the tools they need to become partners in their children's education. My name is Poonam Saxena, and I am your host for this podcast. I am so glad you are joining me today. I hope you all are staying well and hopefully seeing some spring like weather out there somewhere. We certainly are here in Georgia. And we're going to continue our conversation about bullying. March has been a very unusual month. And before my next guest and I started recording, I was telling her I usually don't try to get into these deep, controversial type topics because I want the podcast to be very open and light and um, non-controversial. But something inherently must have told me that I needed to do this, have this conversation about bullying in the month of March 2021 in light of I'm now seeing of all of the racial hate crimes that we are seeing across our country, especially in our Asian American community. So I'd like to go ahead and introduce you to Bibi Naz Pirayesh. Yes?
Yes.
Okay, Bibi Naz Pirayesh, and she is the founder of LA Educational Therapy. She works with children with learning disabilities from grade 1 through college. And she works on educational remediation to help children understand how to manage their challenge and how to be as successful as they can in a classroom. As you can imagine, parents also need help with understanding how they can support their children. So Bibi is here to guide us and give us some practical solutions of how we can best help our children with techniques that she uses in her program. So Bibi, welcome to our podcast. It's so awesome to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Oh, I'm really happy you're here. I am sorry that we have this topic of bullying that seems to be so prevalent in our conversation right now. But I think it also lends itself to what your work is, because not only are you working with children who have disabilities, they're often the targets of bullying. So, can you talk a little bit about the children that you work with?
Absolutely. So I am situated in the west side of Los Angeles. I work as an educational therapist. In Los Angeles, it's very clear to people what that is, but people in other parts of the country may not really know the term. Essentially, educational therapists are specifically trained to work with students who have different kinds of learning challenges, learning differences. My own work is very much focused on remediation because I'm a big believer that while it's important that we contextualize and understand the differences that kids have as really a gift that they bring to the table, I also am a big believer in helping kids work through the different types of challenges that they have. And essentially remediate their learning differences. I'm sorry about that.
Oh, and we have an additional guest who is in the studio. And who do we have?
This is my little puppy. His name is Boo Boo. He's 3 months old. And normally he's very quiet when I'm working, but I don't know. I think he thinks it's Friday and it's time to play. So my
And
apologies.
no problem at all. No problem at all. We're happy to have Boo Boo in the studio.
Thank
So
you.
let's start with how have you found the transition from being in school last year to not being in school to going back to school? How has
Absolutely.
that affected how has that affected your clients and their ability to learn and also their ability to handle the social deficiencies that they've had for the last year.
Absolutely. I mean, what a year. It's been, just an unprecedented experience that has really thrown everyone, teachers, parents, kids, for a loop. I personally, based on what I've seen in our community here and also, kind of with the larger picture across the country, I've been incredibly impressed and proud of the ways in which we've all, risen up to the occasion. The way that teachers just seem to almost overnight switch over to doing virtual schooling. Kids have somehow survived this incredibly stressful year. And then parents, with having to work and school their children from home. It's been incredibly challenging. But I was just reading an article actually this morning about, this transition that we're making back. And I think that as much as we have to really acknowledge how difficult the last year has been, and give ourselves not just a break, but also a pat on the back in terms of just being able to get through it. I think that it's also really important that we begin now to frame things for ourselves in terms of everything that we have gained and everything that we've learned over this past year. I think for the population of kids that I work with specifically, this has been an incredible year because for the first time ever, parents have been able to very closely watch what happens with their children in learning. Obviously, the switch to virtual has been especially difficult for a lot of kids. It's been surprisingly really beneficial for some kids. A lot of my students with executive function difficulties, ADHD, etc., have actually found it helpful to be able to work from home at their own pace, have everything written down. And what that's also provided is a window for teachers to really begin to understand, oh, okay, well, these things that people like me advocate for and ask for are things that we can provide and are things that do help children. So just really simple things like, with kids who have executive function difficulties, for example, not penalizing them if things are late, allowing them to work at their own pace, making sure everything is written down for them. These really, really simple things that used to be impossibilities and schools would not be willing to accommodate. Now they're things that that we're doing for everybody. And I think that it's actually a testament to the incredible power that difference has. I'm a big believer that children who learn differently have a lot to teach us about how to teach everyone. And it's one of the things that we really tend to miss. My background is in neuroscience or even in psychology. One of the things that we always talk about is if you want to understand how a process works, you have to look at it where it breaks down. And that, in a way, is the gift that we get from kids who just don't do things that fit into our norms. And the pandemic has been an incredible opportunity for us to see that more. So as difficult as it has been, I also think it's been it's a really great opportunity for us to begin to see things and do things differently.
It's so interesting that you say that because for me, I've always felt that we teach in a box,
Mm-hmm.
right? You used the word norm just a few moments ago.
Mm-hmm.
And norm is a criterion that someone created, right?
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't you or me, but someone created this norm. And not everyone fits in that box. And that's where I think our challenges occur. Like you were saying, it's where is the breaking point? And especially for children who have learning disabilities and learning challenges, they don't fit in the box, yet we are determined to place them in this box.
Absolutely. And I mean, it's not something that only comes up with kids with learning disabilities. It's something that we see across the board. Our education system is an incredibly, incredibly narrow way of kind of measuring learning, or even talking about learning and growth. It's based on a very specific way of learning that has to do with a linear approach, that has to do with academics, which, we know, I mean, the diversity that exists in human beings is so that there's all kinds of minds for different types of things that we need in our world. But we've managed to somehow create this very narrow window and say everyone has to fit into this. And if you don't, then there's something wrong with you. And that's not something that we just do in education. It's sort of the basis of, our psychology, the way that we pathologize and diagnose everyone. So there's this very specific norm, like you said, that's oftentimes, we know now that was created by primarily male, primarily white, Eurocentric norms. And the majority of the subjects that have been used to create those norms tend to be American college students, which we know are not exactly representative of the world. So there's a lot of flaws in the ways that we've set up our structures, and then as a result, we now have to spend a lot of time, energy, money, policy, etc., trying to deal with everything that falls apart because our structures are so incredibly narrow. And so that, for me as an educational therapist, one of the major ways that I hope my work differs from, let's say, the way that special education training happens is that I'm not looking to see, okay, well, this is where you're supposed to be, and this is how you fall out of that, and this is what the problem with you is. Rather, the question is, who are you? What are your strengths? What do you bring to the table? And what could we set up to help support those strengths? So, that's the luxury of an individualized kind of one-on-one setting, which obviously we don't have in schools. But it's a completely different way of looking at things. And, you were mentioning, for example, everything that we've been going through this past month, especially this week. It's been bringing up a lot of questions around difference. How do we view difference, and the real systematic issues, the real epistemological issues in the way that we view diversity, that we view difference, that results in much of what we see. And so, I think the case of kids with learning differences, if we allow them, if we allow it, can teach us a lot about what we need to change.
So, how do you keep keep your clients motivated, and how do you keep their self-confidence high? Because, you and I are both, brown women,
Mm-hmm.
and we've grown up in this community, and we face challenges. But when you're looking at children in school and you throw on top of that they are learning challenged,
Mm-hmm.
and their peers are looking at them differently, treating them differently, communicating maybe not in the nicest way, and we'll call it bullying.
Mm-hmm.
How do you keep your clients in check to help them understand that the other person just doesn't really understand you?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I think is important, and one thing that I try not to do, is to put the pressure of having to deal with that on the student alone, because I don't think that that's fair. And that's one of the reasons that a big part of my work is also about working with teachers, working with principals, with schools in general, around the kind of classroom culture and the kind of school culture that we have. Because it's really difficult, for a student who's already struggling and already the recipient of bullying and other types of stresses, for me to say, okay, now you're the one that has to like learn how to deal with this too. I just don't think that that's fair. Obviously, the number one way in which I work with students to help boost their confidence is around the academic work, because once they're able to see that no, actually they can learn and they can succeed and they can do well, when some of the systems shift a little bit and allow them to work in the way that they work best, that automatically is a huge confidence boost. So that in itself. I'm also a very big believer in the power of that, therapeutic relationship. Just a student, I do spend chunks of the time in our sessions sometimes talking about, well, what happened in school today? Why are you upset? Because it's really easy to see when kids are not centered and they're not okay. And because we have a relationship, they're able to open up and talk about things that they maybe wouldn't talk about with their parents, etc. But generally speaking, in situations where there's a specific bullying incident, I always try to start not with the student, but with the system. Because, the question is, well, what are we doing that's allowing for this? Obviously, I do want to say that some of this is human nature. We are pack animals. Difference makes us really, really nervous. We tend to have a deep-seated fear of kind of being ousted from the pack, and anything that's different in us makes us really nervous. And the easiest thing to do is to always project that onto the most obvious, the most vulnerable person that we see around us. So, that sort of part of that is just the way that we're built as human beings. But that too is something that can be supported and shifted as a result of education and culture. So, for me, the most important thing is to involve everyone, including the teachers, including the principal, including the other students, the parents, etc., so that we can all as a whole better understand what's going on and not put the weight on the victim, essentially, of the problem.
I love that you say that it is a team effort, that it is
Yes,
the parent, it is it's the therapist, it is the teachers, it's every single person who touches that child during the day.
absolutely.
It's
Yeah,
it's
because go ahead,
Go
sorry.
ahead. No,
Uh,
go ahead.
I was just going to say it is because one of the issues with the way that we deal with students or with people in general in our kind of Western scientific approach is to really disembody them, decontextualize them, and ultimately dehumanize them, because we see people as individuals that are independent of their environments. And that's not true when the issues and the problems occur, and it's not true when the healing has to occur. We live in relation to others. That's just the reality. There is no self if there is no relation to other. And we tend to forget that, unfortunately, in kind of the roots of our psychological thinking is very much about the individual. And so the individual carries all the burdens, and the individual carries, all the big wins too. And again, one of the things that kids with learning differences show us, because they are not allowed to have the wins because they don't fit into that meritocratic system, is that that doesn't work. It just doesn't work. So absolutely, we have to look at the child in the context that they're in, and all the little every interaction, every relationship is going to have an impact. So that's one of the reasons that I tend to keep my practice pretty boutique, because I do get very much involved with a student and a family that I'm working with, because I don't believe in a model where parents are like, okay, I got to pick up my kid from school, and then now I got to drop them off to go get this remediation, and then I got to take them to this thing, and so it just becomes almost like hitting all these check boxes without taking the time to really see what's going on with a student. And that, I think, is what makes all the difference.
You're so right. I made sure that they got their soccer cleats to
Mm-hmm.
practice, that I got them a snack, and I got them to the educational therapist to get whatever she's going to do for my child. And then it's
Right.
more of a task than an investment. And what I hear you saying is that investment in your child, in what's going on, facilitates a stronger child, but also a stronger relationship between the parent and child. And when the teacher becomes involved, also that relationship as well, which is what EDUME works on very hard, is to create those opportunities for parents to get involved. And we often think, and I want to ask you about this, because we often think when we say get involved, we think, oh my gosh, I don't have time. I've got to get the soccer cleats to soccer, and I've got to get them their snack, and got to drop them off at their educational therapist. It doesn't have to be this overwhelming process to become involved. And I'd like, if you have some pointers, to share with our audience what exactly we can do that's not so overwhelming.
Yes. Well, I mean, I'll say this. I think that this is yet another way in which this past year has been an incredible gift, because it just came and put a stop to the whole hamster wheel, go go go, run run run. I don't have time to do anything because I've got to do all the things, but I'm not really doing anything mentality that culturally we have. And it really shut that down. And I think that now we have an opportunity, now that we've spent a year having time to reflect, we have an opportunity to really move forward in a different direction. In terms of what can we do, my answer is always do less. Do less. Give yourself the permission to do a lot less. I think that kids are incredibly overscheduled. Parents are incredibly overscheduled. There's this idea that, being busy is some kind of badge of honor, that it's sort of, some kind of marker of success. And, we know everything that we know about learning and growth is about time, is about patience, is about slowing things down. And none of that matches, what we do in our society. So, I think there's been, for example, a lot of anxiety around, the learning loss, the COVID slide, like what's going to happen? The kids have missed out on all this. They're not going to get into, college or whatever. And just the anxiety around that shows you how meaninglessly scared we are about nothing. There's Yes, of course, yes. Is there a learning, like, did we not learn all the same things in all the same ways as last year? Yes. Is that going to make or break your child? Absolutely not. The most important thing that you can do for your child is to slow down, is to give them time to do nothing. We know that that's when learning happens. It's during the break. It's when your brain is attending to something else completely different. It's when it's looking at the walls. It's when it's reading. It's when it's relaxing. Sometimes it's when it's playing video games. So I think that the best thing that you can do is just to do less.
I probably should have talked to you when my kids were at home, because I am guilty of every single thing that you just said. I was go, 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 drop one kid off here, drop the other one off here, pick this one up, drop that one off, make sure they had something to eat in the car. we were super scheduled. Now, in fairness, I have 4 children, and so if each one of them had something every day, that was 4 places I needed to be.
It's exhausting. It's exhausting.
Listen, I know. You don't have to tell me. I think I'm still exhausted. They've been in college for 3 years. I'm still
Wow.
tired. But, it's a great piece of advice because the pandemic really has allowed us to sit back and reflect on what's important because we have not been able to go out. We
Hmm.
can't go through and do what we normally do and go to concerts or to plays or, athletic events. We haven't been able to do that for a year.
Hmm.
And I mean, I'm chomping at the bit to get back, but I also realize that things are going to be different and we're going to be approaching life in a different manner and a little more hesitantly and a little more reflectively.
Absolutely. I
Is
mean,
it
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, is it really important to do so? And one of the funny things is, before we started recording, I was telling my husband we just got our second vaccine on this past week,
Hmm.
and I'm like, I cannot wait to go out and eat in an outdoor restaurant. I
Well,
mean,
listen, I mean, we can't.
we haven't been out,
Right,
right?
right, right. I mean, and,
And
and
so,
I don't want to say that, that the stay at home and the pandemic, like that's a good thing and that's how we should live. Obviously, it's a balance, right? It's a balance. I know that there's also a lot of lingering. I mean, the majority of the students that I'm working with right now, and their parents have this kind of low grade depression, this low grade, almost like PTSD. I mean, we have to be aware of the fact that this is something that has immensely impacted us, and we're going to be dealing with the impact of it for quite some time. And it was a huge loss. Um, there's going to be a long period of grief to follow. We have to give ourselves time and space for all that. But it is really exciting to think like, oh my God, can I sit at a restaurant again, or can I go to a concert ever again? So all of that is really important. But it's good to see, like, okay, so from my life before, what were the things that I really enjoyed? I enjoyed going to a restaurant. I enjoyed going to a concert. I didn't enjoy running my kids to 17 different things. And I'm not even sure that my kids enjoyed that. I think one of the things that fuels us, gives us the energy almost to do all of that, because sometimes I look at parents, especially mothers, and I'm like, how do they even do it? Like, where do they even get the energy to do all this? And I think that
I'll tell you where. I'll tell
yeah.
you where. We wear a super mom cape.
Mhm.
We put it on every single day, and it empowers us to keep chugging until we take it off to go to sleep.
Yeah, I mean,
I think I will I'm very honest about this. I have no idea how we did it or how we managed it, but you do what you need to do. And I want to just say, because you're absolutely right. Balance is the most important piece of what's coming out of this pandemic. We went from 150 miles an hour
mhm,
to zero,
mhm.
and we're sitting somewhere around 45 miles an hour now, I would say. We're chugging along here.
Yeah, depending on
But
where you are in the country.
depending on where you are, right,
Yeah,
depending on where you are. But do you want to go back to that 150 mile an hour life?
right.
Do you need to go back to that 150 mile an hour life?
Exactly. And I think that, when a lot of when I speak to parents, to moms especially, when they dig under to see, what is fueling them to do everything that they do, oftentimes it is based in guilt, and it's based in fear. What if I don't do enough for my kids? What if my kids are not going to be competitive? Everybody else is doing these things. I want my kid to be able to also. And I think the most important lesson that we can take right now in terms of kind of reaching that balance is I'm going to do what's right for me and for my child and for my family, independent of what the larger group is doing. And again, this I think is a lesson from kids with learning differences, because that's what we do. We have to take this system and we have to rearrange it and rebuild it and make it so that it fits this particular student's needs and differences. And I think that that's what diversity really is. That's what inclusion really is allowing space for people to do it in the way that works for them, with the assurance that when you do things the way that works for you, that's when you're going to be the most successful. And to kind of resist, again, that herd mentality and those fears and guilt and shame around, like, oh, I'm not doing what everybody else says I'm supposed to be doing. And again, everyone being home in their own little pod, people have kind of figured out, like, this is who we are, this is what works, this is what doesn't work. How do we now take this and expand it into the larger culture while resisting that pressure that's always there, that tension that's always there about conforming? So I think that that's another way that we can look to kids with learning differences for some lessons around this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh my gosh, this has been such a fascinating conversation. And you said something that is going to just flow into what I want to say next as we're rounding out. You talked about parent guilt, and I have been riddled with it. Even now that my kids are in college, I'm riddled with it. No idea why. My kids are fine. My kids were fine. It's not like, they lacked for anything, but it was always a quality versus quantity type of situation for me in terms of time. And so I still have it, but I think that's some inherent quality that must be within moms, especially, to have parent guilt. But that leads me into the fact that, BB, I have written a book that is coming out on May the 4th, and there's an entire chapter on parent guilt and how to manage it.
It deserves a chapter, maybe more.
And
Absolutely.
and it's a chapter of do as I'm asking you to do and not as I did, because I certainly was riddled with it, but I can reflect back and say that I didn't need to be, because the things that are important for our children, I did those things.
I mean, it doesn't sound to me like your children are just fine. It sounds like they're thriving and succeeding, and they're out there living as adults. And what more? I mean, what do we expect from parents? I think the expectations that we put on ourselves are just insane. I mean, you did a lot more, I'm sure, than you should have. And you should be taking this time now to feel really proud of yourself and really enjoy yourself, not be riddled with guilt.
Well,
So
it's about perspective. It's about perspective. And you always can do things better. But I did want to, if you'll give me just a moment to plug the book. It's coming out on May 4th. It is called Parent Power: Navigate School and Beyond. And it really takes you from taking care of yourself to volunteering in school to testing woes all the way into empty nesting. And so please, 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 if you'd like to pre-order the book, let me know. Shoot me an email. You can find me on all the social media that is out there. You guys know the drill. We've been doing this a while. You guys know it. But I wanted to also let you know, BB, that that's coming out, and I'm hoping it's going to do exactly what you are doing in terms of with your clients, is just giving parents perspective to
mhm,
take the privilege of stepping back and analyzing what really needs to happen,
mhm.
what's really vital. And the clients that you're dealing with that have learning challenges need parents to not push them. They need to support them.
Yes, absolutely.
And and especially if they're being bullied or ostracized for their challenge. because let's face it, we all have challenges, right?
Right.
Even,
And
yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and even if, even if they are not explicitly being bullied, they're bullying themselves in their mind. I mean, just having to go through life and not fit, that, that's a bullying that's going on in your mind all the time. And I think that, like you said, parents, they are coming from a good place. They want to help their child. But unfortunately, what ends up happening often is that worry and anxiety and pushing and trying to get them to do more or to fit or to measure up or to change ends up having the opposite effect. And it ends up being really harmful for the parent too, because when you have a child, the point is for you to slow down and learn from that child, not to take that child and mold them and fit them into what you think they're supposed to be. So there's a lot to unpack there. And I'm so glad that you're writing about it, and making sure that we're having these conversations, because oftentimes people are just suffering in silence and, thinking, oh my God, I'm a bad parent, even though they're doing way more than they need to be. And we know that the kids are also having a hard time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, as we are closing out our episode, I'd like for you to share how our audience can contact you, where they can find you, what can they do, and how can they find someone who can help them with their child if they're struggling.
Sure. So the easiest way to connect with me is on LinkedIn. I'm just under Dr. Bibi Pirayesh. My website is also a really easy way. I get my own emails, and my website is pretty straightforward. It's laeducationaltherapy.com. So that's another way to reach me. For people who want to learn more about what educational therapy is, or to find an educational therapist in their area, they can do so through the Association of Educational Therapists, and that website is aetonline.org. And they can just hop on there, and there's a lot of resources and ways to connect people that way as well.
Oh my gosh. Thank you. Thank you. And I will put all of these links in the show notes so that you can not only reach out to Bibi, but also, get on the national website and find your person that can help you in your geographic area. So thank you so much for your insight and your wisdom and your knowledge today, Bibi. We're so happy that you came on and helped us normalize people.
Right, normalize difference. Absolutely. It was my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, guys. It's been so much fun to spend this time with you all. I hope that you will do some research and get your children some help. Make sure that you keep life in perspective as a parent, especially as we're getting our children back to school. And you can always contact me at theedumi@gmail.com. And if you'd like, again, to pre order my book, just shoot me an email and I will be happy to put you on the list. And if you would like to join our launch party on May 4th, May the 4th be with you. We will be hosting that at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Just shoot me an email and let me know. All right. So until next week, take care, stay safe, and remember that we are working together to educate all of our children better. Bye, guys.